You're live. Okay. Never sure when I'm actually live and when it says I'm live. That's kind of messy. The box that I was looking for these boots forever and forgot to box them up. Doesn't look that much better, does it? But that's just the end of a chair. Same chair as the one I'm sitting, or same model. Many of the boot reviews that I've noticed typically are kind of the same. Different companies making the same two boots over and over and over. So you've got, your mock toe wedge soles, and you've got your service boots, right? These aren't the only kind of style of boots. But typically when everybody's asking about Thursday boots, then most of my views are still Thursday boots, apparently. I'll come back to that in a minute. This is a pair of Thursday boots, and this is also a pair of Thursday boots, so we'll talk about them separately. Now, I've done videos, as I put in my description, of almost all of these already, so I'm not going to go into the details of the this and the this and the this and do the total show and tell like I usually do with that, as much as sort of an overview. A lot of things that I've noticed about what people are asking in comments that are kind of trending or whatever, and have asked me, although I don't get as many questions as I would expect regarding some of these things, but also my experience just as a customer. I did already last year kind of an overview of the different Pacific Northwest companies, so I'm going to try not to be too redundant of that, and that was episode 192. And I did a more, or maybe it was before this, I don't know, somewhere around the same time, I did a fit guide where I was trying to nail down ordering from 171. Some of the issues I was having with trying to nail down the fit of White's boots in particular more than Nick's boots. So the first half of this, or even though the first part of this isn't technically these other boots that I'm going to show, we're in part one. Part one is mostly focused on Nick's boots specifically, but you can apply that to 3 or 4 of the other companies probably, just because they're the ones that I've ordered from the most so far, and not because I'm working for them or promoting them or have any affiliation with them, none whatsoever. Just like I said, I've had less fit issues with them overall than White's. The one pair, I'm still waiting for the rebuild, that I did make a video about those in July, which was the mock toe. But it was just a variant of the Builder Pro boot. So the same one I'll show in a minute. I have 2 different Builder Pros here in slightly different style, and a couple different Packer boots. The White's cutter boots I narrowed down. I'm pretty sure they're the cutter boots, the green ones that I showed. Those are boxed up until spring. They're at the bottom of the drawer. I'm not getting those up, but they are not exactly a service boot, and they're not exactly a work boot. They're kind of a little hybrid thing, so we'll get into that. But so what I had, whoops, wrong window. I'd read a comment the other night, and the guy said he was asking Roseanville if he would do a Thursday Challenger review, and I can't remember. I thought Roseanville did a Thursday Challenger video already, so I don't know why they brought this up. But the Thursday Challenger being, again, a boot that is attempting to be a Pacific Northwest style boot without quite being, you know, would you say it's 70% there, 75, 80%, 90 even? I don't know. Somewhere in there. It's similar, but not exactly the same. So what I had said was I can honestly tell you that they cost less than the Nix boots, but they aren't really the same boots either. They can be used as light work boots, but they still have the, you know, the clunky high heel for similar arch support that many guys won't like if they don't need it. And as I said way back in my first Pacific Northwest video, which was episode, I got to scroll extra for this one. Chapter 35. So way back in 2023, I talked about this a little bit. Before these boots were even introduced to the Thursday lineup. I didn't really need a logger heel when I bought my first logger boots either, you know, but they did not have the arch support. And these have a similar arch support, but I don't know that they achieve exactly the full amount. What's slightly different, and they put some, what I didn't mention in previous, I think they put some slits in the thing to make them flex a little easier, but I'm not, they still have a pretty thick midsole. That's not really flexing all that much. But overall, I don't like the black outsoles as much as the more comfy honey ones anyway. So they were having some shipping and QC issues, quality control, when they came out last year or whatever, that some other reviewers were showing that they had holes in the tongue gussets that were like weird unfinished spots perhaps or something, or maybe they got in a rush to get them out and didn't. I don't know if it was the earlier versions that they had that and then they corrected them, or if it was the later versions where they just got sloppy and just were in a rush. Because like I said, the shipping issues, I didn't get these. These were the ones that were delayed. I think I got 2 pairs, and the one with the nice leather I think came first. So I did videos of both of those. And again, I'm not reviewing the Thursday Challenger in this video because I already made 2 Thursday Challenger videos. So obviously that guy hasn't watched either of my videos. Feel free, guy. But they also do pretty easy returns exchanges with their sizing. Usually runs a bit small versus Pacific Northwest usually run a bit large, because this one I had complained about the fit being too big, but that was after I went up half a size, and you might need to go up even a full size if you want to put in some kind of insole or something, blah, blah, blah. And these, of course, have the cap toe, which is not standard on all PNW boots, even though it's standard on like the Red Wing Iron Ranger or something. So a detail you can get in an MTO boot, but not a detail that is necessarily automatically PNW. And of course, only 2 speed hooks and a shorter height and a pull loop, whether you wanted it or not, and yada, 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 and no real kilty thing. The tongue's a little bit different, you know, not the exact same boot, but slightly different obviously than a typical, you know, army style service boot. Like this is the Wolverine 1000 mile, and this is the Hero, also Thursday. So again, focusing on this one where we have all eyes, no speed hooks, but they did put on the more rugged outsole than the dressier outsole that you would expect to see with the all eyes. But the wax flash, blah, blah, blah. But it's a thinner leather, blah, blah, blah. Then even slightly thinner than this, maybe, but both much thinner than a typical PNW boot like this. Okay, so, which of course is not Nix or Whites, but I included it anyway, just because it's convenient. But yeah, so the typical service boot is going to be this shorter, not, you know, not the 8 or even 10 that I'll show in a minute. And this heel is even slightly, not terribly shorter, but a tiny bit maybe. I mean, we're talking millimeters here. But this is a Vibram and this is Thursdays. So however they make them, the compound similar, the same. Obviously the lugs are, you know, more significant here. still, and the stitch through as opposed to glue. But so a lot of the Pacific Northwest brands do still make their own version of service boots. I don't know how many of them are good welted versus how many of them are, the Stitchdown, the bigger, chunkier, extra overhang or whatever. Because I didn't go into all the minutia on every single boot on the websites, but now the Baker's site, what I was going to, talk about last, I'll include that when I talk more about the whites boots. Someone said about pros and cons of ordering from Baker's, and mostly they had listed them as pros, especially in terms of supposedly quality control. But the main con, I guess, being there's maybe a little baked-in surcharge. And I don't know how many of their product names on their site match up with the product names on the whites site. So I'll come back to that. Because most of my viewers just want to know if the Thursday boots are, a worthy $200 investment when sneakers go for almost more than that now already, right? But I'm still more concerned, personally, me, with these videos, especially with the heavy-duty work boots and the company comparisons thereof and whatnot. Why would I want to order from Nick's instead of whites and that kind of thing? A lot of the, some people will say they like that arch support better than that arch support, or they like the way whites does the hand stitch, or they like, as opposed to the machine stitch or whatever. Not necessarily completely subjective things, but not necessarily things where you can automatically see the money value of it, I guess. Being, it's like, yeah, that's cool, but if the boot doesn't fit me as good, then I'm going with the other company, which was my argument with the other guy who was a total Frank's devotee, kind of newborn Frank's devotee. He had gone with the JK boots initially and then converted to Frank's or something, and was saying he didn't know if he'd ever get into any Nick's boots, and I was saying, well, yeah, maybe not. For me, like I said, I ended up with more Nick's boots, primarily the fit and the price. The price turned out to be lower for most of them because I got them at a sale price or something, so I got good bargains. Whereas, of course, I've made videos about the whites drifter, saying, these cost me the most and fit me the worst, which is still true. So they are almost true. I think, I forget if the other Builder Pros cost me more than these or not, but somewhere in the same range. But then on the other hand, I've also found whites on eBay for, $130 or something used. But obviously this is not new condition, and I talked about this more extensively in the previous video, the 12 boots in 12 weeks or whatever, so I won't go into all of that again. But and when I come back to it, I'll talk about how they have different names and different things, and I don't know if this model exactly still exists or not, or if it's just under a different name. I'm pretty sure you can get something that's basically the same thing as that. Yada, yada, yada. So, okay, so Nick's part A, I guess. Well, I'm kind of do this out of order of what's on my brain right now, but let me just try and read my thing and see if it all falls into place. I guess the drifter does not have the urban drifter. Okay, so the closest thing to this is the Nick's urban logger, okay, which has the arch and the high heel. Then there's the urban drifter that has the lower heel. It's more like the Overlander. So I was watching Tech's video, and he was talking about the Overlander, and I was hoping he was going to go back and talk about the White's Fulton boot that he bought a year ago, and he hasn't. He's ignored me. I've mentioned it twice. So I don't know what's going on with the White's Fulton boots that he got or whatever. They're sitting in his closet collecting dust, I guess. I guess the Drifter does not have the logger heel stack with the extra arch support. What might make the Builder Pro a bit more difficult for construction guys to wear or get used to, but I can still do the high heel personally on asphalt a bit more than some. But then it's awkward going back and forth with lower arch shoes or wedge soles in a week. You know, when I'm wearing 3 different kind of boots in a week just to wear them all. That, you know, it's kind of like an adjustment, getting used to it again. Like, oh, okay, you know. So I had mentioned that to him. The Drifter is also over $600 now with an MTO build, because he had quoted a lower price saying they're almost $600. No, they're not almost $600. These are less than $600, but those are definitely not the same boot and more expensive. And their lead times have about doubled since last year from what I've seen, which still, again, I'm waiting for my rebuild. So it'll be almost exactly a year to the date when I first ordered them to the date when I should receive them. Builder Pro number 3. We'll see how it goes. B, their sizing can be a bit tricky to nail down, so best to opt for one of their quick ship models, which I don't remember if this was a quick ship model, but judging from the number of speed hooks, probably. But I think this was a quick ship model, or it would have been if I didn't order the other leather or whatever the deal was. I don't remember. But anyway, yeah, I always recommend that people do the quick ship of some boot first, and then if you have to return that one, at least you know you figured out your sizing, even though there's a little delay before you get your next one. But a quick ship is less than a month versus months and months and months. Okay. And if you know, yeah, it's kind of an expense, but you'll have a functional boot that you can use in the meantime if you're really in a pinch, you know, as opposed to if you're ordering something fancy for more personal use later. Or more dressy, casual use than work use, I guess. Up for the quick ship models before committing to MTO and wait months to find out if they fit right or not. Yes. And some of their leathers are more fashion forward now, so they won't be as durable as the standard work ones, but at least they have more than just brown and black for more variety in most models now. This was me commenting to something. Yeah, now Nyx has done, I'm sure the other ones have too, but I haven't noticed them yet. And I haven't had a chance to watch all of them before making this video because, yeah, I wanted to make a video. And it's going to be a long video of me talking, but whatever. Again, I'm not doing the total show and tell. But I haven't had a chance to watch all of that content, but obviously if you're doing your due diligence and you want to like really comparison shop as opposed to just getting, you know, 64 brown or mahogany, which I'm pretty sure was just a lie and a misdye of 64 brown. It's maybe a little bit more reddish, but overall I think it's like almost the exact same leather. Other this one has a little bit more texture to it. This one's a little bit more smooth. I don't know. So maybe that's something to do with it. Don't know. And then, of course, this one being a slightly different leather, but basically the same thing. Probably from the same tannery, don't know. Nyx can also be pretty thorough about scrutinizing the most use case scenarios for your most common use, and don't end up with the wrong one for your primary pair. This was the guy's video. A different guy's video that I was watching, where he had started with Nyx, not the old style service boots, but the newer tactical boots, and found that they were mostly great boots that worked really well in other scenarios than the one he was mostly using them for, right? So, you know, he was saying for a hiking boot, he loves it. For a day-to-day on concrete work boot, you know, not as much. That kind of thing. Yes. Again, yeah, Packer heel going to be less of a good choice for construction use, even if you did put lugs on it, you know, maybe. But, I mean, you're just losing a little bit of surface area. I mean, you're still losing surface area on a logger heel from, you know, the wider, more standard. Again, the Overlander would have something a little more like that. but with heavier lugs. Whatever. And then of course this almost entirely meant as a dressy boot now, even though it's, you know, a military inspired design or whatever. Retro. Well, and of course I added this. This was leather before, and leather, of course, not your friend if you're doing any kind of work. But like I said, I'm just mostly showing these to show that the height and the style of the heel stays or whatever in the vamp derby lacing system and all that kind of thing. So yeah, and again, so basically this is still a derby lacing system. The big difference being the ones that I showed was the lace to toe, where it's you have extra eyelets, some models more than others, and the tongue kind of goes under and comes up as a flap instead of this all being an overlay, right? Well, not the same style of overlay anyway. And so, as I had said in a previous video, Frank's and Nick's both kind of caution against getting the lace to toe models as much for work boots, but obviously people still do that kind of thing. The Packer, of course, originally being meant, you know, as an alternate for the mule skinners and such who would sometimes be on horseback, so but not necessarily want all the loose sloppiness of a cowboy boot when you're doing up and down hills off your mount and walking and all that. So the one, so yeah, so I said use case scenarios for your most common use, primary pair, right? Which was kind of the point of his video, but they have more styles that look a lot alike, and it was really hard for me going through. Like I said, I was going to kind of come back to that more for the whites part of this video. But price versus differences, the differences could be pretty subtle. Custom, that was before you were getting into custom upgrades or tweaks. Why do I not have my other list? I don't know. So I just should need this. Okay, fine. So I'm kind of meandering, but why is this one $200 more but doesn't have that arch support, etc. Anyway, there was a guy who had done, and I had put these in one of my playlists for future reference, and they've all been deleted now, and I don't know why, but he was calling them the Frankenstein boots. And he had gone into, I assume, the Wesco site. I don't own any Wesco boots, but I had a bit of fun on their website. They don't offer any with the arch support, but you can really customize stuff like the different panels. So if you want this to be green and this to be blue and this to be red, you know, and this to be black, you can kind of do that on their little toy feature. And so I don't know if he used their thing to do that or not, but I assume that, you know, he got inspired at some point from something like that. And I don't know why those are gone, but he was comparing the leathers, the different leathers that Nick's was offering at the time, which was less leathers than I think they're offering now. And so I really wanted to see how they kind of aged and all that. I was really interested, but he wasn't using them as work boots. He was just on a treadmill and in a doctor's office or something and doing his, when he had downtime, he was doing his little cardio workout or whatever in his Nick's boots. But he had taken, instead of just different colors, he had taken actual different leathers. So the one boot had all the work leathers and the other boot had the more stylish but not the super expensive Wicked and Craig leathers. So for the work leathers, it was kind of like, that boot's kind of a wash, because most people who are buying work leather, it's gonna kind of age based on the kind of work they're doing more than, you know, just even time and wear to a degree. Whereas with the prettier leathers, especially with him on a treadmill, it was kind of like you were going to see how they were going to look if you were doing something like that Patina Thunderdome or something, right? I guess. But being someone who did want, and like I did order one pair of the nicer leathers without really getting to see how they would fully age, and I haven't hardly worn these at all. But so this again is not the typical work leather. Where's the other one? Right here, which of course I do have. Like I said, the mahogany or whatever. So a little bit shinier, a little prettier, a little buttery yellow undertone. You know how they're going to break in and look and yada yada yada. And I got the toe bug on this, which is not a properly really done toe bug. It's just ornamental stitching. Yada yada yada. But both of those Packer boots, and also with slightly different toes, which again, I complained about this toe being not really cut correctly, a bit narrow, but I didn't send them back for a rebuild. These ones were on the other hand were just the standard, and they don't look as much like cowboy boots, but they fit pretty well. But I also went with a wider width, whereas this one I went with the narrower width to make the toe more pointy. So I really did myself in there, making them a little too narrow. But so yeah, it wasn't typical use case for work leathers. I'm assuming, I don't know, that the Knicks likely pulled the plug for such goofy orders because their lead time construction issues this year. That's speculation. His videos, I don't know if they vanished because Knicks told him to go away or he just went away. He was not posting boot content. He was posting a lot of religious content. So maybe he got hacked or maybe he joined a cult or something. I have no idea. But like I said, there was no Wicket and Craig leathers in his challenge, so that's a bit of an upcharge. Wesco, yeah, you can learn the names of all the panels and such maybe from that, but most of the other companies are not as comprehensive on their websites as like that little toy, as I said. What I did learn from him that I want to pass along, because his videos are no longer available, that I didn't know, that I wish I had known because I've blundered through some of these orders, is on their website. If you go up in the top left, before you go into all the MTO particulars and everything, there's a spot called Buyer's Guide. And I made that like the title of this video. So this is kind of the centerpiece of the video. And that's where you get all the extra advice that you don't necessarily get, where they show you the pictures of all the outsoles and all the leathers of the different colors and the different costs or whatever. They did change that menu slightly. I wish they had left both of the original pictures of the leathers to now the new, like what the boots actually look like in that leather. I was having a little bit of trouble kind of matching up which kilties should go with which, because not all the leathers were available in which kilties, but some of the leathers are similar in color. The other ones, if you get them, and I ended up ordering one of the wrong pairs and reorder, all that kind of thing. But kilties are only like, 12 or 20 bucks or whatever. So it wasn't like, that big of a deal, but it was kind of a nuisance. So I do have a couple extra ones lying around here that, for those of you who don't know, that's your tongue protector thing that goes in under the. So this is the longer one that doesn't come with any of the boots. You have to order this separately if you want the one that doesn't just end here at the 6-inch or whatever. But so yeah, that's kind of an add-on that I usually do when I place the order, along with if I want extra laces or something like that. Should have included, should have included mention in my Packer boot videos, yes. But again, I don't remember if I ordered those boots before. I must have ordered, yeah, I think I ordered this boot before I saw his video, but then after I saw his video, I ordered this boot, and I probably didn't mention the buyer's guide thing in that video. I don't know if I did or not. If I didn't, well, you're lucky seeing it here, and if you're watching that video instead, you're missing it. But this is the V-bar instead of the, honey lug, and, the honey lug, again, different than the mini lug with the giant other version of a cowboy outsole. And of course, not the black. And of course, there's at least 3 different kinds of black ones, the fire ones, the ice ones. These, I assume, are more similar to the ice ones. although these might be fire rated. And I'm not covering anything fire rated on this channel probably ever because I don't have any experience with that. But, you know, if you need those alternate stitches and stuff, you definitely want to inquire. Make sure you get the right, you know, configurations in your products and all that kind of thing. And that's where I guess the leather laces are more preferable than the nylon, that sort of thing. Whereas, yeah, when I had called Frank's, I felt a little bit like he expected me to know kind of exactly what I wanted to order and not as much into like giving me like helpful tips. So I almost felt like I might as well use the menu, you know, online and save time if I was placing an order. I'm not positive, but I always like to call anyway, just to make sure that we dot the I's and cross the T's as well as possible before I go through. And then, of course, most of the, like I said, tweaks and things are up charges. So, like, if you wanted the different color eyelets than just the brass, it's, you know, $15 or whatever. And the gal was like, yeah, the stuff basically rubs off pretty fast and you end up with the same thing as the brass. But if you want it, you can pay for it, you know, that kind of. But that was, I don't know if she still works at Nick's or not. I've gotten 2 or 3 different receptionists or whatever. Nixon, yeah, has things that become add-ons, but overall, like I said, I think they're the less expensive company out of 3 or 4 of them. So I already did video on Packer boot construction fit issue, but I kept them for pretty boots anyway. Returned the mock toe for rebuild instead, yes. But you can only do 1 rebuild per order. So I feel that it's better to order 2 or 3 pairs separately rather than order them all at once in case you have orders with each one individually. Why you would have issues with more than 1 pair of boots in an order, I don't know. That would have to be a pretty bad day for them, for any of these companies, for that to really happen. But still, hedge your bets. Save yourself that headache. Like I said, if you want to put some add-ons and stuff with the boot, I usually, like I said, want an extra pair of laces maybe for safety and extra kilties almost always, because I'm almost always getting a 10-inch shaft height instead of an 8 or even a 6. I think 8 is probably the most popular with certain occupations, and the 10 is more popular with others. But again, the most casual boot guys are getting this, so that's probably, you know, just fine with them if they even use the kilties at all. But of course, like I said, this one has the gusseted tongue, whereas many of the other ones, including that White's Cruiser that I have, does not. So, you know, wouldn't really use a false tongue with this, even though it's partially gusseted. Yada, yada, yada. I suppose you could, and it would save a lot of this, you know, kind of damage, but it would also be very bulky and maybe not sit as evenly and correctly as the other ones. Of course, JK being the ones who put the little slit in the thing, but you can add your own slit like I did with these. So there is that. So I guess that's, let's see, the one video the guy had talked about Truman. He was obviously not familiar with Truman at all. Truman has changed a little bit of their excuse me, methods. I think they're doing Goodyear welted stitch on a lot of boots now and that kind of thing. They're mostly more for the exotic leathers than the work applications, and kind of always were. Kind of similar to when the Thursday Challenger with the prettier leathers, where, you know, this is similar to a work leather, but they had the other more shiny ones in the shell cordovan or something, that I didn't bother with that. I had slightly more trouble with white sizing overall than Nick's, but I haven't tried Frank's yet. Right? Okay. Like I said, he was not the Frank's boot guy. The Frank's boot guy was a different guy. So I guess we'll call that part 1. if that helped anybody at all. So we're on to part 2. Again, I was going to kind of go on the Baker site maybe and go through, but from what I had just briefly looked at, you know, there's the Line Scout, which I think is similar to this. What's the difference? I don't know. I was mostly trying to figure out my sizing to see if I wanted to order a replacement of this, which one it would be. So the Line Scout, but that one only came in black, whereas the Frontiersman lace to toe was about $400 versus the Tracker, which had a logger something different. I don't know. Those were both about 430 maybe. Then there was the Stockman, which was 600. I think that was a similar to a Packer boot though, so they might have had 2 different toes. So which one was more close to this? I don't know. Classic Work 10-inch, $700. Packer $725. So why the Stockman is 600 and the Packer is $725? Again, I don't know. The Line Cutter 2 was $600. How that's different from the Line Scout, I don't know. The Long Liner was $750. Was that supposed to be versus the Frontiersman or the other one? The Tracker versus the Frontiersman. I don't remember. Then there was the Roughneck for $750. Then there was Storm Chaser, which for me was a lineman patch or something, so that was $700. So that was not the one I wanted. Then the Skid in black was $650, but I don't think that was a lace to toe either. I don't remember. So yeah, I'm getting kind of lazy here, but like I said, it's kind of where you have to do either call them. I mean, I don't feel right necessarily calling them and asking them all the details if I'm not buying any of the boots, which is, you know, some guy was saying you shouldn't use their service if you're not going to buy their boots. It's like, well, yes and no, because if they had been easier, you know, with the information for fitting, as I had talked about in the fit video, you know, I would have probably maybe not bought these. But the price was so low, it was kind of like, well, damned if you do, damned if you don't. So that, no, they're not a perfect exact fit. But like I said in the other video, they are still a better fit than these for $600 less. So I can still wear them, you know, even if I'm never going to wear them a lot. But then this one is a Packer. I didn't show this in the previous video because I didn't want to confuse the audience. But see, this one, it was my blunder. Again, another one I wouldn't have ordered, but they were only like $120 or something. If I had realized they were a C width instead of a D width, so they are too narrow. They are not terribly comfortable, but they are not really that much different than these, which is why I'm complaining about these being too narrow, because they're almost more like a C width. I mean, you can almost hardly, the only difference is the heels are all the way worn out on this. I can't wear them at all without sliding backwards. But if I want to be really uncomfortable and squeeze into these, I can. And if I want to be really uncomfortable and squeeze in these, I can. Except again, these cost $600 more than these cost me. So, but definitely a prettier leather and definitely the taller, slightly taller. And so this one being Nick's, this one being White's. But this is a White's Hawthorne again, I think. Hawthorne boot. I don't know how vintage these are. I can't really read that. It's embossed, but it's got glare in here. MFG. Oh, okay, so that's all this is. Then there's some other words down here that I can't read at all. Letters. I think that just says Spokane. That doesn't look like a WA. Maybe it's a WA. So I think it's just a Spokane, Washington on there. That's what that is. These, of course, I got without any logos and such. These, of course, do have the Nick's branding on them. There we go. So kind of hit or miss. And these, of course, have the White's logo on them. Whereas these have the other embossed logo. So Yeah, I don't know what I said already in the 12 boots video and the Baker sizing in the previous video versus the Rosanville Drifter 2.0. Whites fit more info than arch support. My arch support video, I was talking more about insoles and that kind of thing than actual boot construction. So if you go back and watch that video and you sit there for half an hour and go, he didn't talk about this, he didn't talk, it's like, yeah, because I was only talking about me, again, personally blundering through the arch support experience, not comparing, to the millimeter or whatever, the difference between the whites and the next arch support. But again, I was left inconclusive with determining whether or not this was even the right size boot, why the arch support feels wrong. And if I had more of a correct size boot, would the arch support feel better? And I don't know, because from what I've heard, a lot of people have the same complaint, that either they like Nick's better or they like whites better. And so, but like I said, the green pair, the cutter ones that I got, that arch support feels fine. I walked for 3 hours in them and didn't have any problem at all. And so I already talked about that, but I'm talking about it again just because. So more insole experiments, but have not tried the NYX leather inserts yet, which should have been in the previous segment, I guess. But so yeah, episode 171 and episode 192. And I already talked about that. The cutter and the cruiser seems to be the big difference. Is one is lace to toe, but both have a packer heel, but neither is the packer. So again, more similar to this heel than this one, right? Although that's still technically a packer boot. So like I said, that's where it gets kind of confusing. But also, if you're doing MTO, you can swap that out. So some models, they won't let you do all the swap outs that you might like. And that's for pretty much all of these companies. And I think that's when they'll step in if you're ordering over the phone and kind of say, hey, are you sure? Or, hey, we won't do that. More than, like I said, make a helpful suggestion of other customers prefer this and this is why. But if you really, really, really want that, which is how one kilt company kind of operates better than some of the other ones. Like I said, yeah, several packers with slightly different names and specs or something that I might try to cover in a forthcoming video, because I'm typing this many months after posting that previous video. But again, the price being kind of what was catching my eye more than what the different details were. Because again, some of those details can be swapped out anyway. That's the whole point of MTO, which means made to order. So that, folks, was my takeaway in a nutshell. And it didn't run too long. I thought it was a little more over time than I am. I keep trying to make the videos a little bit shorter, but then I keep having to say the same stuff over and over, because when I'm reading the thing, I've already said the thing. And then I probably forgot to say some of the things. Like I said, I'm not going back to the White's website while I'm live just to scroll, because there's a lot of other boots that get in the way and all that kind of thing. And if you're really interested, you're going to scroll them anyway. Whereas if you're just watching this to kill time and don't actually really care about the difference between packer boots and logger boots or whatever, then, fine. So as always, yeah, if you have any, questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. I'm just making sure I didn't miss anything on one of these sheets. Like I said, I tried to cover as much of what I thought I could. Like I said, there's some comparison of the different leathers in some of those NYX videos and things. Again, the work leather being slightly different than the prettier leathers, but the one I will show again, just to say, like, to show example, like, the packer boot being not considered a Builder Pro and being considered a different last, whereas 2 both, but still have the arch support if you get that style. But then the regular Builder Pro that I got, again, I'm not positive it was a quick ship or not, but just your generic logger boot that's not a firefighter boot, but similar to a firefighter boot, but in the standard toe. Whereas then I also got the shrunken bison in the laced toe, so you can see how that toe looks different. Because I never did do a head-to-head of these, I don't think. And this one, of course, not having I ordered the taller kilties, but to break them in, I was going to use this. Although this shouldn't require that much break in because it's a supple leather, not a terribly stiff leather. And I got the all eyes, and I already did a whole video on this that like 6 people watched or something. Nobody has watched the video on this, but why, I don't know. But of course, I got them a little bit more, and I switched when I went to the lace to toe. I was going to do a toe cap on these, and then with the lace to toe, they won't let you. But of course, they don't do as many eyelets out the toe as, again, on the other boot. So it is slightly different than the less expensive whites one, or some, but also taller. I got 10 instead of 8 for this, because I figured I was going to pay for all this bison. I might as well get as much bison as I could stand on my leg. And like I said, I prefer, personal preference, I do prefer the taller boots overall for whatever reason, snake protection and all that, and ankle support and all that, and looks, of course. But you don't have to get bison boots that are 12 inches tall. You can get them in 6 inches tall. And I have a pair of Grant Stones that are 6 inches of shrunken bison like that. So, which I didn't bother bringing, but yeah, it's the bison version of this. So, yada yada yada. Okay, well, I just managed to talk for a few extra minutes because I had completely forgotten to show. But my point being, though, in the Builder Pro, this is still a Builder Pro boot. So got the same honey sole on it, changed up the speed hooks, still got this, still the fully gusseted tongue, same height, same natural heel instead of brown, yada yada yada. So like I said, if you're doing black outsoles, sometimes they might recommend that you get the black edging or whatever, but I think a lot of people like the natural colored edging with the dark boots instead of just black. So your results may vary. This one has the natural edge. It's just darkened with time, or maybe it was brown and it kind of rubbed off. So you get a little bit of contrast pop there, if you wanted to do something like that. But they won't allow that with, a lot of the less expensive ones or whatever, where they're just cut and paste, rush them out. So again, like I said, the Nicks, though, I don't know what the other websites have that are similar, but the buy-in guide in the Nicks, you can compare all the different outsoles and all the different leathers and all that stuff before you get into so you'll have a better idea, but then when you get into the MTO, you'll see that certain things won't be offered and all this and that. Okay. Really ran over time a little bit, but that's life.